kind of activity, dissolving problems, answering the question which he puts, how do we get the fly out of the bottle? Ever get a fly in a bottle and have to get it out? You know, how do you get the fly out of the bottle? Puzzle. So philosophy really is in this business of clearing up confusions on the basis of a much looser, broader kind of empirical approach to human behaviors and human language behaviors. Now, one example which he uses may help. He has a little book that actually comes from some lectures he gave called Uncertainty. Now, obviously, the topic is epistemology. And what he's doing is taking on one of the demands of Enlightenment epistemology, the demand for certainty. If you like, he is a postmodern criticizing Enlightenment epistemology. Okay? Now, he starts by referring to G.E. Moore's famous lecture before the British Academy in which he was going to prove that two material objects exist. Remember, here is one. Here is a hand. I know this is a hand. Now, what do we mean when we say something like that? I know this is a hand. Where my behavior, Moore's behavior, show that they know this is a hand. And the words simply reiterate it. Well, it means, makes no sense to doubt it. Makes no sense to doubt this is a hand. I know is sort of a guarantee I give you, my personal assurance, that it's a hand, not a false something or other I'm just holding up to you. But in addition, the claim that I know is claiming that a whole picture of the world is basically correct. I know is part of a much larger, coherent worldview in which there are certain basic beliefs, as he calls them. So he has a, if you like, a common sense realism that is argued for from the verbal behaviors that are involved. That's Ryle. I take it back, that's Wittgenstein. Now, a couple of words about Gilbert Ryle, who on into the 50s and 60s was still publishing. Two books of his that I'll refer to. One is called Dilemmas, and the other, The Concept of Mind. Dilemmas, yeah, it's about philosophical disputes, philosophical problems, realism versus idealism, freedom and determinism, mind and body, science and religion, which is right. And posing them as alternatives seems to put you on the horns of a dilemma. Well, he has a whole book dealing with these dilemmas. And his point is that they are false dilemmas, pseudo-problems. They are disputes over the territory that language covers. They represent what he calls, and this is a notion for which Ryle is quite famous, they represent category mistakes. category mistakes, where one word is used in two different categories, okay, so that you're equivocating and there's no real dispute. Now, he illustrates the notion of categories, and he's talking of different language games. Words used in different language games can sometimes lead to confusion of language games. But he illustrates what he means. Take, for instance, that notable, worthy, delightful British sport of cricket. He says, well, there is the batsman, there's the bowler, call him a pitcher. Here are the wickets, that's the sticks in the ground. There's the pitch, that's the 21 yards in between. But where's the team spirit? Oh, that's in a different category. It's not an empirical object like these other things. You see. So he maintains that this is the way in which philosophical problems arise, the problem of sense perception. You know, do we perceive material objects or only sense data? Well, it depends whether you're using the language of neurophysiology or ordinary experience. If you're talking of perception in terms of ordinary experience, there the language game is such that you see material objects. If you're talking of sense perception in terms of neurophysiology, there the language game is such that you see sense data. What about freedom and determinism? Well, if you talk of human behaviors in terms of causal conditions, that's what the determinist does. But if you talk of the same behaviors in terms of responsibility, that's what the indeterminist does. You can talk of the same things and play two different games, the determinist game, the indeterminist game. Science and religion likewise. Mind and body likewise. Okay. Now, some people have picked up on that and said, oh, okay, then two languages can be complementary. And so they invoke the scientific complementarity principle. Remember the complementarity principle from physics, perhaps? How do we describe the way in which light is transmitted? Is it transmitted in waves or in particles? Well, why does it have to be either or? Complementarity suggests wavicles. There are two complementary things, complementary pictures of the same phenomenon. Well, could that be the same in this case? Well, in his concept of mind, he's not at all clear that it is the same, because there he talks about the mind-body problem. And what he's trying to do is to map out, and notice the vocabulary here, he's trying to map out the logical geography. That's a very familiar, popular phrase. You're doing logical geography when you're trying to sort things out. And if you're doing logical geography, you're trying to do some map work. So you're trying to map out the logical geography of the knowledge we already possess about mind. Not trying to find some new information, but to map out the geography of the knowledge we already possess. Already possess? Yes, in our language behaviors. Because the way we use language has developed and been tried and refined and tested over centuries of the history of a language. And so it hides within those behaviors all sorts of tacit knowledge. And what he's trying to do in the concept of mind is to map out that tacit knowledge. Now, you notice that mind and body are both nouns. And so we slip into the habit of treating mind and body as two separate things. Mental states and physical states as two different categories of things. All that just because mind and body are both nouns. Misled by a superficial grammatical similarity rather than probing to the actual usages of the words in language behavior. You see. So he suggests we should think rather in terms of mind language and body language as having to do respectively with private as distinct from public behaviors, conscious behaviors as distinct from physical behaviors, so that emotions and motives are simply private inclinations to behave in certain ways. They're subjective behaviors that incline us to certain objective behaviors. And when you say, I'm angry at what's going on in LA, you're saying something like, I want to yell at someone. You say the private feeling is a disposition to overt behaviors. Well, in that fashion, what he does is to translate all statements about mind and mental activity into behavioral statements. So he comes up with a version of the mind-body problem known as linguistic behavioralism. Mind language is simply language about private behaviors. Linguistic behavioralism. Not metaphysical language, no. But mental language is about actual or intended or possible bodily behaviors. That way. Well, it was that book of his, The Concept of Mind, which started a debate going on the philosophy of mind, which has been going on from the 1950s to the present day. And some of you have been taking philosophy of mind courses, so you know something about it. Incidentally, we've had two approaches to philosophy of mind recently. We've had the course that Roberts did, which is much more philosophy of mind in terms of psychological states, emotions, inner dispositions, okay? And you may have noted that Roberts' way of dealing with it, is in terms of an analysis of what we mean when we say, what we are doing when we say, what we have in mind when. You see, because his philosophical method is very much influenced by this ordinary language technique. From Wittgenstein, he occasionally teaches a Wittgenstein course, which he learned in his graduate work at Yale under Paul Holmer. You see. So this is a method that he uses with a great deal of effectiveness, without limitations about metaphysics that some people have. On the other hand, if you've done some of the philosophy of mind stuff, which O'Connor does in contemporary metaphysics, you see, you've got a different method. But the point is that in the development of